Hello, Between the Chapters Book Club. It's your favorite admin LJ here. I'm so excited today. We're going to kick off this week with a really great chat with Anabelle Bryant, author of Duchess If You Dare. Some of you may know this is one of our book club picks for this month. This is actually admin KM's pick, but I'm so excited about this book that I stole the chat from her so that I could talk to Anabelle. You can let admin KM know what you think about that later. Feel free to make some jokes at my expense, but I couldn't wait to talk about this one. So I'm really excited to have all of you joining us a little bit before we have her pop on. For everyone who doesn't know, Anabelle Bryant is a USA Today best-selling author who began reading at the age of 3 and never stopped. I think we can all relate to that one. Her passion for reading soon turned into a passion for writing, and of course, an author was born. She's happy to grab her suitcase if a new adventure presents itself and finds endless inspiration in her travels, which we'll definitely have to ask her about during this conversation. If you haven't gotten a chance to pick up Duchess If You Dare, this is the first book in the Maidens of Mayhem series. This series is set... got a little ahead of myself there. The Maidens of Mayhem series goes from the glittering ballrooms of the Ton to the city's grittiest corners. London has no shortage of wrongs in need of righting, and the Maidens of Mayhem are more than ready to take on that challenge. These ladies are fierce, feisty, and a feminist take on Regency-era Robin Hoods. I think we can all agree that that's pretty awesome sounding. So, without further ado, I hope you'll all join me in welcoming Anabelle Bryant, author of Duchess If You Dare, onto our chat.
Hi.
Hi, Anabelle. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday evening and getting our week kicked off to a great start.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Just to kick things off, for anyone who hasn't been reading this book with us this month or who hasn't gotten a chance to start Duchess If You Dare, can you give us just a little rundown of what the book is all about?
Duchess If You Dare is Scarlett's story. All of the Maidens of Mayhem, which are introduced in this book, as this is book 1 of the series, have a backstory of a harder life than the normal aristocrats and ladies that we're used to reading about in the Regency. But I wanted to create a feel of something we all can relate to, even though it was so many years ago during the Regency. And in Duchess If You Dare, Scarlett, who has vowed to be a very independent woman as part of the Maidens of Mayhem, a group that fights for what's right in England, comes nose to nose with a duke, a very stuffy, stoic duke who believes in classes and all of the laws and what's proper. And he finds out that he has to learn quite a bit about other people and acceptance as much as she does. So it's her love story, but it's also very much a story of becoming and understanding.
I already know it's an incredible book because I've read the book already, but that sounds like a really great time for anyone who hasn't read it. You obviously should be reading it. Go out and grab it immediately. Speaking of Scarlett, as one of the very first Maidens of Mayhem that we get to meet, can you tell us a little bit about what inspired her character? Was she from someone who's a real historical figure, someone you know in real life, or just your imagination?
Imagination always plays a big part, but my inspiration for Scarlett, and even for starting the Maidens of Mayhem, is from a real fictional character, if that makes any sense. I come from a house where my husband and my son love superheroes, and they were watching Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. And she's beautiful, she's strong, she's independent, she's intelligent, and yet she's deadly. So watch out. And I started thinking about what it would be like to have a female fighting force in the Regency. I wanted to keep it historical. I didn't plan for anyone flying around with their capes. I wanted to keep it realistic and historically accurate, but also represent women who wanted a voice. So that is what inspired Scarlett's story. And as the rest of the books come out and we get to know the other maidens, you'll see that they also feel that way.
I'm so glad you said she was inspired after watching Captain Marvel because it's one of my favorites. So makes sense why I loved Scarlett so much. So we do have a reader question. They're wondering how you came up with the names in your book and whether or not Scarlett and Ambrose will be in book 2.
I love this question, and you have to stop me if I start rambling because coming up with the names of my characters is one of my favorite things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's even if I have to name a horse in a story, coming up with the name is a big process for me and one of my favorite things to do. It always has a meaning. And I try to choose a name that reflects their position in life and their personality to some degree. So Scarlett is dangerous. Scarlet, the red color danger,
Right.
and she can be deadly, but she's also beautiful, like the color scarlet in a rose. And Ambrose has a lot of growing to do as a duke. Even though he's a duke and he was born into it young, he has a lot of growing to do. I wanted to pick a really stuffy name, which is something that I consider, but also something that over time, as you get to know him, you can see him grow into his name. And I don't know if you noticed, but there's a rose in his name too, Ambrose. So all of that kind of plays a part. We will definitely see Scarlett in other books because it's all going to overlap as far as the maidens part. They each are standalones, but I think when I'm reading a book, I love when I get a glimpse to see what the other characters I read about are up to. So we'll definitely do that.
I love that. And I love, like you said, I do love that Rose is part of Ambrose's name. And like you said, that connection of scarlet roses. You can't get better than that. I think that's such a cool little link between them. I also love how names get created. So I love to hear what inspired them. So speaking of the inspiration for your characters and where they kind of come from, you said that part of it is your imagination. Did you ever have a character while writing this book that just surprised you while you were writing, that they kind of became something you weren't expecting or did or said things you weren't expecting?
Great question. The times that happen usually are with secondary characters. When I create a character who is going to be a foil or he's going to be a bit of humor, and then all of a sudden he takes on so much character and he becomes quite a character that he needs his own book. So that does surprise me sometimes. Characters that I haven't planned to really play a very large part of the story become such a reader favorite or a favorite of mine as I'm writing that I want to carry on then and write their story too.
I love that. You can never go wrong with a great secondary character. I always fall in love with them, and I know I should pay more attention to the main couple, which I do, but those secondary characters are they're so much fun.
I think that's something really unique to romance readers. Like we want to know about everybody in the story and everything that happens. And Martin is Ambrose's brother in Duchess If You Dare, the one that makes a lot of trouble that his brother the Duke has to figure out.
Right.
And I've had people email me that when are we going to learn what happens to Martin? When will we have Martin's story? And that's not something that I've planned right now, but now I'm inspired to think about that.
Right. Now you think, oh, maybe.
Right.
The interest is there at least.
Right.
So we do have another reader question. Unfortunately, my system just went down, so I can't pull it up on the screen. But they are wondering, I talked a little bit at the beginning about how your travels inspire you. So they're asking, what's a place that you've traveled to that you didn't expect to be inspired by, but ended up just running with?
Oh, that's a great question. Pre-pandemic,
right? Of
because
course.
obviously our lives have all been impacted, and now we're armchair travelers. At least I am. I have been very fortunate to travel extensively through Europe and different places, and I kind of expected England, obviously, to be a source of huge inspiration for me since I write about the Regency. But I also visited many parts of Italy, and I was just taken with the beauty there. And many parts of it, I don't know if maybe I had a view of Italy and what it was going to look like. And then when I arrived there, I was so surprised. We all know of the historic sites and the things that are automatic sites that you see when you go to Rome. But just the countryside and the beauty of the country and the warmth of the people there. So I do think that was very surprising.
That's so cool. I mean, I can see how Italy would be inspiring. I know when I got the chance to go, that's one of the places that I thought, ooh, if I could be a writer, that's where I would write about. But I'll leave that to the experts. That's not for me, I don't think. So another reader question, would love to know, how did you decide on writing about the Regency era?
Great question. Thank you. I have been reading romance for more years than I'm going to admit on this live feed, for many, many years. And I always was very taken with the aristocracy. And even though the Regency era is a very short period in history, it has such culture and it has such charm and romance. And I think the courting of the man and the woman is just something that we don't see in any other era of history. And I was charmed by it. And I just always knew if someday I could achieve becoming a writer, that's what I would like to write about. So it's definitely the decorum and the balls and all the beauty of that Regency era that draws me in.
Yeah. Are there any other eras that you would entertain possibly writing about one day?
I love history. I really do. When we talked about travel, I always want to seek out all the historic places when I travel somewhere. But I think if I ever did write another genre, I think I would write in today's world, contemporary, because as much as I love the Regency, there are a lot of rules in the Regency.
Yes.
And I do strive to follow them all. I want my story to be historically accurate. So I follow the rules.
Yeah, I love that you brought up how many rules are involved in a Regency era. Did you have, I imagine you had to do a lot of research in order to really understand the societal expectations and those very strict hierarchies that we see in play and that we definitely see in play in novels. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went about that research, or if there was something that just really blew your mind when you were doing the research?
Well, for Duchess If You Dare and for the Maidens of Mayhem series, I needed to research something beyond what I had already written about, because I needed to research police and runners and private investigators, because in Duchess If You Dare, of course, they're fighting for justice. So I was dabbling in something I'd never looked into before. And something that was very eye-opening to me was how overlooked so many of the classes were, even by law enforcement. They were just overlooked. And Scarlett comes from very humble beginnings, and she's going nose to nose with the Duke, who has everything on a beautiful pillow at his fingertips, because he is the highest there is. So researching Bow Street runners and how the law would overlook different things at brothels and gaming hells and all of that was very eye-opening for me. And I am a softie, so I felt so badly for all the people who kind of just had to live with the injustice that was in the class system.
Right. I definitely think that I would get lost in the research part of it. I would definitely fall down a rabbit hole, but I know that would probably be my favorite part of the writing process, were I to tackle a historical novel. What do you find is your favorite part of that writing process? Is it towards the start, towards the end, somewhere in the middle? Like what is the part that you look forward to when you're writing?
I love the beginning. I absolutely love the beginning. I think that's when I'm drawing everything into the picture that's been running around in my imagination for so long, because I'm a pantser. I have no idea what I'm going to write until I sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write now. And I've written myself into some really sticky situations that way that I've had to figure out because I had no plan. But I definitely love the beginning. I feel like those subtle little hints at what's to come and developing the personality of my characters before they come into conflict is my favorite part.
I know our Between the Chapters group has quite a few people who are interested in writing or who have aspirations of writing. And you talked about how you've occasionally gotten yourself stuck into a corner, especially as a pantser. How do you overcome that, or how do you like get through a writer's block moment? Like, what is your strategy for those times?
I really believe in stepping away. I don't
Mhm.
feel like you can force anything. I go for walks. I do something totally different. I play video games with my son. I go wash the dishes. Sometimes it's not as simple as one day goes by and I figured it out. Sometimes it takes a little while, but I
Mhm.
feel like I have to let my words breathe and I have to let my story breathe, and eventually it will come to me. And thankfully that has pretty much worked out. The worst situation I ever got my characters into is they were on the roof of a burning estate and there was no way to get down.
That would definitely qualify as a sticky situation.
And a lot of things that we take for granted, or a
Mhm.
giant ladder or the fire engine, those things didn't
Right.
exist, so suddenly you have to find a way to get them down. There isn't a big trampoline or a tarp for them to jump into.
Right. No, I can definitely see how that would be a bit of a corner to work through.
But
um,
you work through it though. Figure it
you
out.
do.
Don't quit.
Yes. No, I can only imagine the kind of creativity that had to be involved in working through a situation like that and other situations that I can think of that pop up in this book. I mentioned a little bit earlier when I was going over your bio that you've been reading since the age of 3, and that you are, a pretty voracious reader. I gather from having read your other interviews, knowing a little bit about you, that it was pretty early when you knew that you wanted to be a writer. Can you tell us a little bit about that moment? Was there something that inspired you, or a book that you realized, oh, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to be?
I have always been fascinated with words. I
Mhm.
am a word nerd and I'm proud of it.
Right.
I still remember at 3 reading Billy Had Ducks. I probably could recite the story. I won't do that now.
Right.
Um, and I always was a writer. I still have those black and white marble composition books that I was
Mhm.
writing stories in when I was 10 years old. I shudder to think what they say, but um, I just was always interested in words and reading and writing. It was my thing, and it led to my career as an educator also.
Mhm.
So just being around words and writing, and I admire so many different authors, and I am a voracious reader too. So I'm just always taking in. And I think you mentioned before people that want to be writers. I think reading is
Mhm.
such an important part of writing. They definitely go hand in hand, and one feeds the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which leads us to a great reader question, actually. For you, what are some other books or genres that you enjoy reading? And I'll take a step further, especially while you're in the process of writing, or in those block moments. Like, what book do you turn to?
Well, if I'm reading historical, I do have some favorites like we
Hmm.
all do. I mean, Sherry Thomas, if you're not familiar with Sherry Thomas, you need to read her books because they will rip your heart out of your chest and you'll stomp all over it and then you'll put it back and it'll be all nice again. She is just amazing with her level of emotion. Contemporaries, I like to read something really light and happy, not
Hmm.
something angsty, especially if I'm trying to work through a problem of my own. I don't want a lot of tension in what I'm reading. I like to read about books that are set in New York City.
Hmm.
You asked before what would I write if I was going to write contemporary. I'd set it in New York City because I'm here in New Jersey, and I love the city, and it just to me offers so many opportunities. So I'm not sure if I answered that question or if I went on a wrong turn there, but
No, I think you definitely answered it. I liked it. I agree. I love to read contemporary stories, but I'm also one of those that I don't like an angsty contemporary story. I like a very soft and happy. That's why I read romance. I like the
fun,
happy ending.
right? And just keep it light and fun.
Exactly. So we had a really interesting question come in. Where do you find inspiration for the costume and clothing and those intricate, like that visual piece of your story?
Well, part of it comes from actually looking at period clothing that people wore.
Mhm.
Part of it comes from looking on Pinterest and looking at on the internet. And another part of it comes from just daydreaming and wanting to wear it myself. I've never been lucky enough to go to one of those events where you get to dress up in a period dress.
Mhm.
I mean, I would love to do that.
Right.
But I've certainly had my moments when I've thought about it. So, inspiration for costume and clothing, sometimes it comes from the scene that I'm writing. I mean, if you read Duchess If You Dare, you will see very quickly that she is not dressed the way the ladies in that time period were used to dressing. She's
Mhm.
made some changes to her clothing because of what she does when night falls.
Right.
Um, but if we're talking about ball gowns and beautiful day gowns, I'm a girly girl. So I like to look at pretty dresses too. And a lot of that comes from the historical content and my own imagination.
Hmm. I love that. Again, that's part of that rabbit hole that I would absolutely fall down if I had to do research. It the book would never get written, is what I'm saying from my end. Um, One of the things that I love to ask any author I do an interview with that they tend to hate me for a little bit because I'm making you pick favorites. But if there's one character from Duchess If You Dare that you could spend a day with, either back in their time or bring them to contemporary times, who would that character be?
Oh, it's Aylesford, Duke of Aylesford, Ambrose, of course. I
Of
am a
course.
romance writer. Come on.
I feel like I should have seen that one coming, but you never know what answer you're going to get.
I began writing romance because I felt like the heroine, was never represented the way that I wanted to see
Mm-hmm.
her. I wanted a smart, intelligent, strong woman, truthful to the times. I mean, they lived in a different era, so women did have their
Right.
place, but at the same time, someone who was an independent thinker. But
Mm-hmm.
even though I write that into my heroines, by no means does that not mean that I don't want a handsome hero or a dashing earl or a duke. So definitely Ambrose, because the way that I wrote him, I guess, would be the way that I envisioned, a handsome hero to be, especially
Mm-hmm.
someone strong enough to be matched with Scarlett.
Right. No, and he's definitely strong enough for Scarlett, which is no short order. Scarlett is quite a firecracker when she wants to be. But, that's what makes her so fun and perfect to be a Maiden of Mayhem. She lives up to that name.
Well, Scarlett is has protected herself, and she's like a hardened
Mm-hmm.
woman who went through humble beginnings, and she learns how to be softer and vulnerable. And
Right.
Ambrose is very stoic in a different way. It's
Mm-hmm.
decorum and duty, and he learns how to be vulnerable in a different way. So on
Right.
that, they both meet halfway.
Right. Which, is the perfect foundation for any long lasting romance. So I know we've touched a little bit on who inspired Scarlett and a little bit of the inspiration for this book. One reader would love to know um, what influenced the choice for the location, especially of this novel. We've talked a lot about how your travels inspire a lot. Was there one particular travel or one particular thing that just brought this one to mind?
For the Maidens of Mayhem, I wanted to keep them in London
Mm-hmm.
because that's where you were going to find a lot of crime and a lot of wrongdoing, which is what the
Mm-hmm.
Maidens of Mayhem are fighting against. But in many of my other novels, I go outside of London. I like to bring my characters out into the country or to different areas of England, just not just for the reader to explore somewhere else, but
Mm-hmm.
also to make it more interesting, because change of setting is another way to keep the story interesting and intriguing along the way. But for the Maidens of Mayhem, for this first book, I definitely have them in the dark alleys of London, and where all the crime was that they wanted to fight against.
Right. Absolutely. I can see how London was the perfect setting for someone who just wants to fight a little crime during the Regency era in particular. I I would imagine there were things going on that don't make it into this book happening back then. So, I think that's pretty smart. Let's see. So one of the things that would love to know is, you know, like I said, I kind of talked a little bit about what character you would love to spend a day with. Is there another author that you would love, another author that you would love to pick their brain, living or dead, just one author that you would love to
Wow.
do an afternoon tea with?
Well, if it's an afternoon tea, then it's Jane Austen, of course.
Of course.
But if we're going to be wandering around England, then I'm going to go with William Shakespeare because even though he's way before, hundreds of years before the Regency, he was quite a party animal himself. He got out there too. So I think he could show me quite some of the places in London and educate me about what was going on even back then in his era. But that's a really difficult question because there are so many phenomenal authors and so many people that I just admire their writing. That's a tricky one.
I know. I love to throw a curveball right near the end of the chat just to see where we're at.
Thank you.
I think William Shakespeare and Jane Austen together would be a party. That would be a great time. I would love to be invited to that hangout.
You're invited.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I took a little peek at your website earlier today and saw some really interesting fun facts about yourself. One of which that I just knew I had to ask before this chat ended. You said that you like to build miniatures and miniature rooms. Can you tell us what got you into that craft?
I am just, this sounds silly, but I'm fascinated by tiny little things. I don't know why.
I love that.
Can I do a show and tell? Because there's one sitting right next to me here.
Absolutely. I would love to see one.
So this is a tiny little reading room that I made.
That is stunning. Wow.
Tiny little things. I don't know why. It actually is a stress reliever. And earlier you asked me, how do I work through plot problems? And I mentioned things like taking a walk and washing the dishes. Well, also doing that. It's another creative outlet. But while I might be putting together a little chair or something, my mind is spinning and going with how am I getting those characters off the roof of the burning house?
Right. Have you ever built a room or a location from one of your books?
I didn't, but what a fabulous idea. I never thought about that
more
before.
Than welcome to steal that idea. I would love to see one of those.
I did make a bookstore once, and then I gratuitously put all my books on the shelves, little miniatures of my books.
Of course. Why wouldn't you? You've got to put them right on prominent display. Which does lead us to a great question. One of our readers is new to you and your works, and they would just love to know how many books you've written, how many are out in the world.
Duchess, If You Dare is my 16th book, my 16th novel.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you so much. It's exciting. I am so excited about this new series. And the Maidens of Mayhem, they don't mess with them.
No, would never. They could absolutely take me out if they wanted to. I would never cross paths with a Maiden of Mayhem.
I think part of the fun is no matter how tough they are and what they do, they're like all of us. They need love. They want to give love and be loved.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all have that soft side and we all just want to be understood. And I love that we're seeing these women, especially like Scarlett, who does have that hardened exterior. And it gives us a chance to see, what it means to reach out to someone and like actually communicate and have conversations. I think it's really powerful, especially in a story that does inevitably end up in a happy ending and does inevitably wrap up with love. We get to see all those little pieces in between.
True.
So, you just made the incredible announcement that this is your 16th book, which is just amazing. How do you celebrate a release day? Do you have a tradition or anything that you do special?
I'd like to say that we pop champagne and we all go out and have a big dinner,
right.
But that's not true. I do eat cake. Mm-hmm. Cake is important to release day. Actually, no, I think that's somewhere that I need to really work on things and make it more of an event because it is such a huge achievement and it is a very special day. I'm often on social media. So So I might not have all the free time, but yes, I think I'm going to incorporate more champagne.
Okay, well, I am the queen of small celebrations and large celebrations and milestone celebrations. So next time you need ideas, let me know because I will come up with some for you. I
That
love any
sounds great.
excuse to indulge and have fun. Um, so we are right at the end of our chat. You mentioned that you're always on social media, so give a shout out, let readers know where they can find you online to learn more about all of your books, including Duchess If You Dare.
I am on Facebook and Twitter. I'm new to Instagram. I would love if you find me there. I'm discovering it's one of my happiest places of all. I'd love if you visit my website. You could sign up for my newsletter there. But I have such joy in talking to readers about all books. It doesn't have to be my stories, about all books, about reading, about romance. And I'm very approachable. So I'd love to hear from people, whether it's email or online. I really enjoy that.
Great. Well, that is the end of our Q&A. So again, I want to say a huge thank you, Anabelle, and to all of our readers who tuned in and gave such great questions and had a lot of really fun comments down below. So thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
All right, and we will talk to everyone soon. And readers, stay tuned online because we are always throwing more author chats. And feel free to give us a shout if you have an author that you want to invite on to the next one, and maybe we'll make that happen. So for now, good night, everyone, and have a great week.
Bye.